And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the breakout rooms. Definitely one of my favorite moments because I like to talk a lot and I like to connect and forge relationships. That's my passion. Anyway, the next panel is going to be branding and positioning, how to create unique products. We have four fantastic speakers, sorry. So we have four fantastic speakers and it's moderated by our own Sandra, the queen of the summit. And I'm looking forward to it. Branding, it's definitely something which is very important. I can see Mayank has joined us. Hello, Mayank. We are going to have a couple of people live from the studio, Gui and Bart, and obviously our own Sandra. And then we are having Mayank live from India, yes. Are we all ready to go then? Yeah?
Yeah, let's.
Okay, rock and roll.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone, and welcome to that session. As Kate was saying, like today we will be talking about branding and positioning. I'll be moderating this panel, and I'm surrounded by three great experts here. So I'm gonna first let them introduce themselves. Guy, do you want to go first?
Sure. Welcome, my name is Guy, and right now I'm going to talk to you as founder of Out of Co, which is a consultancy and content creation platform for co-living operators. And I have a bunch of stuff to say around branding. Apparently that's why I'm here.
Hello everyone, my name is Bart Sasim. I'm CEO and co-founder of Spatial Experience, as well as co-founder and managing partner of Co-Living Ventures that you may know from Co-Living Insights or Co-Living Awards initiatives. I'm really looking forward to it.
And Mayank? Oh.
Okay.
We have a technical issue there.
Well, the question is, do we have a technical issue, or can anybody else in the audience right now not hear us? Can you please write something down? Not able to hear.
Or shake your hand.
We can hear you. Okay, everyone can. Thank you so much.
But Mayank can't.
Huh? Mayank can't. I know.
Okay.
Probably the Apple headphones, right? They always work, but not in the moment where you want it to be.
Oh.
Guys, I'm back, I think.
You're back? Yes?
We've got
Yeah, Mayank is there.
Amazing.
Okay, great.
Okay, Mayank, please, we just introduce ourselves. Who are you?
Hi guys, Mayank this side from India. Been a co-living operator for last 6 years. Recently ventured out as a PMS provider for co-living. I also head marketing for coliv, and yeah, that's all about me.
Great, great. So today's session is going to be divided into two parts. First, I'm going to harass those guys and ask them a few questions. And then it will be your turn with a Q&A. So please feel free to send your questions as we're going, and we'll go through them at the end of the session. So let's get into this. We're going to start with the positioning part. As we all know, the co-living industry is getting wider. Many and more operators are coming on the market. What I would like to ask you is, what if I wanted to create a product today? Which strategy should I adopt, maybe in order to create that product?
Okay. And when you, just quick question, like when you say like strategy to adopt the products, like how to create it, like what should I think about?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, what if I leave like the words to my comrade right here, and maybe afterwards to you, Mayank, first.
Okay, let me pick this up. So, well, location is about two things. Real estate is about two things: location and target, and at least you know those two core ones. So. Let's start with the target group, right? Speaking about co-living, some of us might have a specific target in mind. I think it has started with co-living for young professionals, because this was the market gap that many co-living operators decided to fill in. But in my personal opinion, co-living is about community, and it doesn't really matter about what kind of target you approach. It could be also student co-living. It could be also co-living for young professionals, as well as for families, and also seniors, active adults, or like assisted living, right? Being together definitely strengthens our experience. So having target in mind and knowing knowing the specifics, it already allows you to start building positioning and brand around it. So that would be number one, you know, and then obviously you need to start thinking about the product, you know, and how do you want to position the product on the market. So what kind of amenities, facilities do you want to provide? How does this relate into what competition does? And what makes you basically unique, right? So positioning is about basically knowing where do you want to be, you know, like how do you want to be?
Can I just interrupt you a second, Bart? So you just said what makes you unique, and that's actually the topic of this talk. So I would love to go deeper into this.
Yes.
So what do you think that makes a product unique?
I think there is many aspects that may make the product unique. Or you already mentioned that co-living industry is becoming more and more dense. There is more players appearing pretty much every day, which is fantastic. And I think finding true yourself, so the way you communicate, you know, so it could be, you know, a way you communicate to your target. That's something that can make you unique. The way you deal with sustainability. That this can make you unique.
So differentiation factors.
Exactly.
Huh? Okay. A lot. Which actually brings me kind of, sorry, Mayank, I'm taking your time right now. Please feel free to interrupt too. But like one thing that I actually wanted to mention. So back in the tech scene, there's a guy called Peter Thiel who is very known. He's like an investor, like one of the first investors into Facebook and a bunch of other startups. And he says that, like, if you really want to outperform something, your technology got to be 10 times better than what's currently on the market. And so when I was thinking about your question, I felt like there's two ways to think about a product. One is to look at what works in the market and copy it. Or, you know, as Picasso said, like, good artists copies, great artists steal. Like, you know, just copy what works, you know, because you can create like a co-living residence and copy like the same amenities that are from your competitors, and it can work out. Now, but in order to stand out, and I'd love to talk about this, but in order to stand out, I would really think about what is the one thing, or maybe even two things, but what is really one thing that's going to differentiate your brand from anyone else? It's going to give you a competitive advantage that no one else has. And it can be around sustainability. It can be around the type of audience. There's, for example, there's certain audiences right now that are very underserved, single-family parents, multi-generational co-livings. It can be about like shared ownership. So I would really pick what is the one thing that would differentiate me, and how can I build my entire brand around that one thing?
Guy, so basically, I categorize positioning in two parts, right? One in the physical product, which co-living is, and other one is in the experience, right? So when we talk about physical product, there are certain features, there are certain amenities, and there are certain kind of basic features that people expect, right? So you position your physical product in one way, and how can you make it unique with respect to the better design, better common areas, and then communicate accordingly. And then there is experience of living with a certain set of people, experience of community, experience of living in that physical space. So in my opinion, and when I was running co-living space for last 6 years, this is how we defined positioning for Simply Guest, and that the physical space need to have a particular set of features, and how we communicate those features, position it in a certain way, and then the experience part of it. So just a small example, right? On our website, to communicate and position our community aspect of things, we used to actually anonymize the data of the people living in a space, because we had multi-location spaces. And we used to put that what is the average age, or what is from which sector or domain they work in. So even with people who are actually looking out for spaces, they get to know that this is the kind of, and this is the demography of people, this is the kind of people who are living in, that actually becomes a first touch point for people getting interested. And the curation becomes much easier. The communication makes it easier to portray what kind of people you're looking for, and how do you want to position yourself. And the other thing is which Bart touched upon, I want to again touch upon that communication through various touch points, whether it is customer service, whether it is sales, whether it is general interactions of community manager, all the touch points and the communication around the touch points, because co-living is experience driven. The communication around those touch points and how it is perceived become one of the most important point on how do you position your brand, and how people perceive it in their mind actually.
Yes, and I would even add something, which is communicating around the touch points is great. And what is then even better is actually making these touch points happen afterwards. Because one thing that I also see sometimes in co-living spaces is to communicate how, like, a lot of expectations, like we have these great communities and we have this amazing experience, but then you come in and it's actually not always that case. And so when you set the expectation higher than reality, that creates frustration.
Yeah, indeed, Guy. And so about what you were saying right now, so that was maybe a scope of the subject we're going to talk about today. But Guy, how do you think that people can differentiate themselves right now on the market?
Well, I guess, okay, one is kind of Bart started saying there's audience. So audience and concept, which is very closely related, but a couple of audiences right now that are underserved generally are one, multi-generational audiences, so building complexes that even like in the same apartments that share, where people share from completely different age groups. Number two, for example, single family parents, that's what Kin is doing with Common. Number three would be for people with affordability needs. There is very, very, very few co-living spaces that really tackle the issue of affordability in a public policy type of meaning. We can talk about the promise of affordability afterwards. And then the last thing is niche co-living. And I think that there's a lot of like very hyper-specialized niche co-livings that can be created. Some of them exist a bit more like in the entrepreneurship scene, where you have like only for entrepreneurs. Startup home is one of them. Entrepreneur house, and then startup embassy, of course, is the third one. So there's a bunch of in that niche, but it could also be really niche down to even further. It could, instead of being just entrepreneurs, it can be entrepreneurs who, for example, raised 5 million, or who are, for example, in the fintech industry. It could be cooks, but not only cooks. It could be cooks who are doing only vegan food. And like, I think the further niche down you go, the more differentiation you're of course going to have.
Yeah, I completely agree with this.
Bart, go on.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with this, and I think what you touched upon, Mayank, is a good definition. So, product and experience, right? When we talk about positioning in that sense, or let's bring this into another metaphor: hardware and software, or like propco and opco, right? Really understanding the stakeholder matrix and industry may really help you to define a product that is missing on the market. Whether it is about the audience that we've been talking about, the size of the let's say the community that you want to build, whether it is like, let's say, a clustered building with amenities being shared between 8 and 12 people, or bigger communities, everything is obviously then defining the product that might be appearing to a specific target audience, right? Some people come to cities and they are really interested in having a lot of friends since day one, right? So this plug and play aspect, this could be one of the points of differentiation, like activities that are happening on premises. Connection to other aspects of life, right? Like one of our clients, Greystar, their positioning is also related, let's say, to the physical space, right? They chose to go for the locations that are really well connected to the city center, but they're not necessarily in the city center. They create almost like cities within cities, right? So that's this type of positioning, you know, appears strong. To a specific target audience, but also to you know, to on the other side, to investors and all the rest of actors on the in the coliving industry, right?
Yeah,
So
which leads me to another thing, which is when we do branding positioning, who are we talking about, right? Are we doing the positioning? You just mentioned, for example, that to me personally, it might not be the most attractive setting, but to an investor, it really might be, because you're outside. The square meters for land is way cheaper outside of cities. So the branding and positioning in that case for that specific target audience makes a lot of sense.
I think,
So
yeah,
I want to put in another point here, right? So in cases of single location co-living spaces, which are single location, it becomes a little bit easier whether you are within the city center or outside the city center. But the moment you go multi-location, a lot of different location in the neighborhood that they are present in, whether they are in a high-end neighborhood or in an average neighborhood, defines a lot of factors on which the property specific positioning happens, right? So it can be under the same brand. A single company can manage both the properties, but the positioning of both these properties will differ in people's mind, right? So that is something for multi, as we are growing and scaling and becoming more sustainable as a domain, as co-living domain, it becomes very big. And most of these places, most of the operators are now going multi-locational. So it becomes very, very important to look at that aspect along with the different stakeholder aspect also, that how do you position that particular property with respect to the neighborhood it is present in, because that also defines a lot of factors, and a lot of people give a lot more importance to neighborhood than to the property itself. They may agree on or relax on certain features about the physical product itself, but they need a certain kind of neighborhood that they want to grow in. So that is something which also comes into picture as now co-living companies and operators are now scaling to multi-locational places.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you for the precision. I would love now to talk a bit. We've started mentioning a few brands in there. I would love to go to the second subject of this talk, which is branding. So I feel like that sometimes it's a word that can be scary. So I would love to ask you, maybe we can start with you, Bart. So what are the challenges when you are trying to create a brand?
I think there is a number of challenges. One of the first challenges is understanding what branding is, right? I think there is a lot of people out there. What is branding? What is branding? I think there's a lot of people out there who think that branding is about creating a logo and a website, and they stop there, and then they wonder why, you know, one day can't really create like a unique DNA that is going to essentially create the feeling, right? Create the community around this, you know. So like branding is all about emotions, you know. So what you leave with people, like when they come to your website, or when they see the logo, or when they come to premises, how do you treat them? What stays with them, right? That's something that is intangible. And I think when it comes to like branding, it's obviously, I already mentioned, it's not so easy that it's only about the logo and the website and all of this you know, basic touch points, but really understanding the full spectrum of different elements, and also stakeholders that are involved in brand, you know, in receiving brand, right? So from investor, asset manager, operator, the developer, and also end customer, as well as, you know, as potential partners, right? So if you have a strong brand, your business becomes more likely to be successful because it attracts, right? That's there is something that you essentially left in people's minds, you know, whether it is a tagline or it is the feeling, you know, that it is about the service, anything else, you know, that essentially will make people make this logo stick, you know, with you through a number of elements, is going to be basically making your brand successful. So there is a number of ways tapping into like different examples how different brands did well, you know, in this or that aspect. But I think it's really about defining this this DNA and staying true to yourself, you know. So what Guy already tapped into, like overselling, you know, over branding is not good. Underselling, underbranding is also not good. I think it's about this golden middle, and this is to be defined actually by you, your business partner, as well as your customers. So ask your customers how do they feel about your brand. Run surveys, you know, and also ask the employees, you know. So this whole experience of like investor experience, employee experience, business experience, and up to customer experience, that's what should be taken into consideration when thinking about brand. So it is a complex process, and it takes not 1 day or 1 week or one website to go live. You know, it's a constant development. It's just like life. You know, it's a, you know, there are certain life cycles in brand.
But one more thing, I want to ask you this, right? So you talked about what are the challenges in branding. So what are your thoughts on so developing countries versus developed countries? And we see co-living is growing everywhere. And when we see a country like India, and when we see a country, any country for that matter, France or UK, right? So the kind of branding challenges that exists are totally different in these two different geographies. So when I was starting the co-living space, Simply Guest, our biggest challenge was, do we keep affordability as the centerpiece of all our communication, or do we keep community as a centerpiece of all our communication? And that's something that most of the developing countries struggle with, because co-living is all about community, but in developing countries, affordability comes before community, and it's the other way around in the other parts of the world. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, yeah, of course. I think the community can be created. You know, that challenges obviously. Affordability is one of these challenges, but I would not say that you can put an excuse of not being able to facilitate community. This doesn't really have to cost you much if you provide the right tools, right? If you develop proper brand assets, you know, like operational procedures, manuals, facilitation toolkits, right? People can thrive, you know, in communities. It's the same with brand. Like if you've got fantastic user-generated content because you provide great community and user experience, that's something that you know, already creates the brand. You know, there is so many other ways that can be developed organically. So it's not necessarily about this, like let's say, run towards developing the brand in one go. It's a constant improvement. It's a everyday challenge. You know, to challenge actually yourself. You know, what are you truly about? The DNA.
What I'm actually curious about, because I do feel that if your core focus is on affordability, you probably don't actually are going to put that much into experience. So there's a tension there, and I'm actually really curious to know, Mayank, what you hesitate between, like, should I communicate around community, should I communicate around affordability? What did you choose and why?
So we ended up choosing affordability for the first 6 months, and then we realized that if we go with affordability, the quality of people or the end user that we were getting were not what we wanted to serve, was not the demography we wanted to serve. And then we changed our communication to community, and that's when we realized that the kind of people we wanted to serve as our ideal customer that we defined were coming to us. So this is exactly what happened with us back in 2016.
Yes, it reminds me, like, so I have this this hierarchy. I call it like you need to find your common denominators in your residents, right? So meaning, like, what are the things that your residents are going to have in common? We talked beforehand about like very niche topics, which would be like at the top of the pyramid or of the hierarchy, which would be like interest-based communities. But the levels a bit below are communities of residents that actually want to be part of a community. Because if not, you're going to get the residents who just want your product for the sake of housing, not for the sake of living with other people. And that can get very tricky. Because then you're going to...
Which brings me actually to my next question, which is, So what is actually, so I see that we talk about, we're speaking about community and experience and affordability. So what would be the exact role of branding into the community building process?
What is the role of branding in the community building process? I think that, well, your brand needs to reflect who you want to attract, meaning it needs to talk the language, needs to talk the colors, etc. But really beyond that, I think that especially if you want to create a true community, and usually one thing that unites people is a common mission and vision, then your brand should reflect that. Right. So yeah, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
for example, startup
Okay.
embassy, startup home makes sense. Okay, I get it. It's startup home, and then I see that logo, and it's about like growth, and I understand that I'm gonna go there to grow my stuff. If it's called just like the Get Shit Done House, actually that would be great too. But yeah, it could.
So the intangibles bring in a lot of so branding is all about intangibles, right? So when you see a lot of the way you communicate, the way you are or how you are perceived, you attract right kind of people. Curation of community becomes super easier, and building becomes super easier. So branding, if your branding is right and it hits the right spot, I think it becomes very easy to build great communities and engaging communities. And the ROI of community, we have not spoken about. So as we spoke about ROI of community or ROI of branding, that comes into picture here. And there are a lot of studies that has happened, and Coca-Cola study has been the most interesting one, where they have quantified the because of the branding that it has, it generates 33% higher revenues. Out of total revenues, 33% revenues come via brand. So that has been a detailed research over 5 years that has happened on this. So we can extend the same logic to co-living spaces, that eventually if you have a great brand, the cost of customer acquisition in terms of numbers reduces, because it becomes easier to acquire a better quality of customers, which can in turn create great communities.
Yes, and you're gonna have more engaged customers, which are going to create like higher referral, which are gonna stay longer, and which are going to most probably also bring their friends. I remember there's one co-living space in the US that is very invested like heavily into communities, and 90% of their future customers are actually being referred to by their current customers or members.
Yeah, I think
That's very high.
Yeah. I think what is also quite important is to really think about how do you start, right? Because in the beginning, you might start somehow building a brand, and you need to attract customers. So you want to build awareness, and that's basically day one of starting on your business. And you already, Mayank, mentioned about retention and lower costs, of acquisition. I think this also builds loyalty, right? Like we can see some brands here on the screen. Around those brands, people tend to stick around buying products of those brands, like computers, and then from the same brand, then they buy a telephone, and some people might stick around to driving the same car, for years, like me. Like I just change, for example, different Volvo types, and that's what sticks to me. And people who drive the same car or use the same product, might be attracted by similar qualities of the brand, right? So that creates the loyalty and the retention, because you go back and you know what what kind of products you can count for. But also, this actually builds recognition, and this recognition is well necessary right now, especially nowadays when there is so many different brands, and your role as a co-living operator or co-living operator and owner is to attract different stakeholders. So you want to make sure that that you also do it well on the business end. So like B2B as well as B2C is very important in terms of branding, and that's why we're also here. Most of us run businesses. There might be people who are about to launch co-living soon, but they're also customers, right? So that's what we need to think about when we think about brands. Like the best way to think about brands is like how externally people think about brands, and also how internally, right? So then we've got loyal employees, and we've got loyal investors, who are willing to basically join us on another great adventure with another property, and basically bringing up also the scale, which we all desire.
But
Let me just
I
make
want
a
to,
quick comment here, and then you can go, Mayank. So we're going
yeah,
to start a Q&A in a few minutes, so please drop your questions within the chat. You can go, Mayank.
yeah. So basically, we were facing, so in India, because of the cultural dynamics, right? So I'm sharing a real life example of what we have gone through. So because of the cultural differences in different section of the society, there were certain sections of the society which would not rent it to a certain section of the society, right? So there's a lot of discrimination that goes on. So fair housing laws are not as strong as it is there in US or Europe, but um, so we wanted to basically so now here I'm talking about campaigns, right? So a lot of times companies don't start with a particular brand in mind or a positioning in mind. They just start it as a business, right? And if you'll be surprised to see that 70% of the business start without thinking about brand values or missions or visions or branding or positioning. They just start as a business. They just start that I'm spending 1 rupee, I should earn more than one. That's how generally businesses are started. Everything comes later. So for us also in 2015 when we started it, it started as a business. But at some point in time, we had to go through a lot of these discriminations as a co-living operator because uh, there were restrictions that were put on us that you cannot do this. So now, as a brand, as a company, we had to take a call that what we want to stand for, and we started a campaign. So and you can see this on our website as well on SimplyGuest. This campaign is live. It ran for about 6 months. So we ran a campaign called All Are Welcome, right? So we wanted to create a brand, or we wanted to create a perception in mind that if you are thinking SimplyGuest, you should think all are welcome. So this was the catchphrase that we used, and then we created a lot of cartoons and creatives, and our whole communications, our whole marketing campaign was around all are welcome. So whether you are married or single or this or that, all are welcome at SimplyGuest. So and we created multiple communications around different dimensions, whether it is being married or single, whether it is food preferences, whether it is your living preferences, whether it is your you stay early or you stay up late, any kind of staying preferences. So that is how, and it actually automatically started resonating with our end user, and eventually this is what people started thinking about us, that if you go to SimplyGuest, all are welcome. It's not that they're going to say no to anything. And that became an anchor point of our brand in 2017 and 18. And we eventually reaped a lot of benefits out of it. A lot of publications covered us because of this campaign, and we got a lot of ROI just because of this branding campaign that we wanted to do for ourselves. But this came later. We started it as a business, and later eventually ran this campaign and made sure that our branding or our brand speak in a certain way or a certain language. So this is something I wanted to share with the larger audience, that a lot of times we don't start with a branding or a mission or a vision in mind. It's okay. On the go, we eventually get a lot of insights from the end user, and we eventually end up creating a brand.
Yes, and could I maybe add something to that? Which is, I love what you say, especially because when, especially if you create in co-living a model in which you are really focused on your residents and on their needs, then those needs are also fluctuating, right? And it might be that after the first weeks and months of hosting your residents, that you understand what their strengths is, what their unique positioning, what makes their culture stand out. And these things you can sometimes predict before, but you can't always. And you will recognize maybe that like the majority of your residents are actually artists, right? And so like there's like a huge artists culture in there, or that a lot of them like wine and cheese, right? So and even like these little branding elements, you can incorporate them into your marketing, into your brand. So iteration and building on the go.
Yeah, it's all about organic growth, and I really think that Mayank, you mentioned about they start with business, but isn't business already like a brand when you think about building a brand, not necessarily from logo? Maybe they don't have a logo, but they've got certain name that people might resonate with. So they already start building brands from giving the name and typing the first message. I think that's where it all starts. you know, and then it goes on, and it might not be necessarily like super expensive, you know, agency who's gonna be doing this for you, but you can do it yourself, you know, and also start, you know, as you go, improve it. It's an ongoing process, and if you have like a proper research done on like on the positioning of your competitors, if you've got strategy for yourself, that's already brand.
Thank you, Bart. So we are going to now conclude this part. Thank you very much for your insights. That was very inspiring and helpful. I'm going to have a look at the question in the chat right now and ask our expert to help you out. So we have here a question from Aitana from Special Experience, and she's asking, what would you say is the first step when you start to define your brand? And she mentions, of course, taking into consideration that you do know your market and have defined your opportunities.
I'm not gonna take this question because this is from my managing partner.
Mayank, do you want to go?
Mayank.
Okay. So,
Yes.
So basically, in my experience on what was my first step when I started to define the brand was to define which dimension I want to focus on. As I mentioned earlier in the discussion that we were having, that whether my focal point of communication or focal point of everything that I do at Simply Guest was around community or affordability, right? So defining that one focal point of everything that you want to do or what you stand for, and eventually then basically all the SOPs come later. So there are a lot of things that you will have to do eventually. But even before that, taking a step back, just defining what is the dimension that you are that you want to focus on, uh, to basically it becomes the part of everything that you do. So that is something that I think is the first step, and that I took as a first step even before defining anything else. Whether we didn't even define the name came later, the logo came later, but before that came, what do we want to focus on, or what was that one dimension that we wanted to focus on.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you. I have another question here from Akan. He's asking, can a brand be co-created, and are cooperative development models in real estate possible? Is anyone inspired?
Yeah, I'll say please do you. The very simple answer is I'm not so sure about cooperative developments. I'm sure it is possible, but I haven't come across many or any. At least not in the co-living industry as we know it. In Switzerland, there's a lot of like, it's called Genossenschaften, which is kind of co-op developments. But I think it's very influenced by certain legal frameworks.
Yeah, I think, yeah, in case of like PPP formulas, yeah, you're right, there is not so many, but as the industry grows, essentially institutional investors, these are the people, you know, who basically bring the money from either our retirements or from other sources, right? This is this could be also done if there is enough education in the market, and that's something that we actually do need, more education on the market. We are trying to educate industry with our publication, Co-Living Insights, that we've been working also together on. And I think if we've got a little bit more transparency on you know, how different models could work like, and a little bit more exchange, this would definitely help. But I don't have like one precise answer to this question because on the top of my head.
Yes,
so
maybe like
maybe
the answer, Mayank, please go ahead. But maybe the answer to that very simply is, Hakan, if you do create a brand around like corporate development, I think you're gonna stand out.
No, so basically in India, we recently had a rental housing development. So basically rental housing policy that the government came up with, and under that policy, it's not co-living specific, but I'm just giving a similar example that in public-private partnership, government is working with private operators, and some of them are shared living and some of them are co-living operators, to create affordable rental housing to construct affordable rental housing for a certain section of the society. So this is how they are co-creating. The government is co-creating. It's in rental housing industry, but not specifically co-living. But the same thing can be extended to co-living as well.
I think Claire was tapping into this subject on the previous presentation, and a matter of like affordability, tapping into affordability, and she might be the right person to be asked this question. Claire from Keys.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So I have another question that is actually to Guy. As you mentioned, the bottom-up approach, how would you do this as a startup? And how would you connect entrepreneurial vision to the communicate, share vision and purpose?
How could you repeat the last part? How could you connect, please?
Your entrepreneurial vision
Yes.
to the communicated, share vision and the purpose.
I think it's the typo. He's saying to the community.
Please.
Maybe we can focus on the first part.
Okay. I'm totally spacing out right now. Do you mind if I can read it? Thank you. For establishment of product, what space? This one. Okay. Okay.
Okay, maybe let's ask.
Okay, I got it. Okay, I got it. I think that the answer to that. Okay, first of all, I'm not so sure. So the bottom-up approach really is about involving your residents into your co-living space, right? Into your co-living experience, but also into your co-living brand, which brings back to beforehand, can you co-create a brand? I know that, for example, Urban Campus, who are going to talk, I think, tomorrow or later today, they hosted the first time that they opened a space. They actually, before opening the space and creating it, they gathered all of their interested leads and created like a 1-day or 2-day workshop with them in order to co-create actually like the product, right? So co-creation is totally possible, and bottom-up facilitation, I think, is not limited to like big company or startup. I think especially if you're a startup, it might be even easier because you have more flexibility around how much you can involve your residents into the space.
Thank you, Guy. So I think that might be the last question. So we have Williams Johnson from Beehive Living Co-Living asking, for established co-living brands seeking to develop a new product for a new audience, what's the best? To develop the new product under the current brand or to create a new brand for the new product? And what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And actually, there is no right answer because, yeah, you can. There is few different ways to do so. I mean, if you look at what we do, we like to be very specific about what do we deliver to the market. Also with co-living ventures, you know, like we've got awards, and then we've got co-living insights, and then the co-living venture is also separate. we do deliver technology under one brand, and then we do brands research and R&D under another brand. So I would say. It depends on your preference. Obviously, there is a higher investment if you want to develop a few brands, but then you're also more specific, right? So specificity of the brand needs to be taken into consideration. If you think that the market share allows for the development of a new brand, and this specific demographic is going to be more associated with the positioning and branding that you are currently offering, just go for it. However, if you think that your current brand is already so strong that you don't need to develop new one, then just stick with it. Maybe I can bring one example. I've been working with the Student Hotel since early days, 2012, and the Student Hotel has developed fantastic brand, you know. And under this brand, you've got student living, student housing offering. You've got short stay, you've got mid stay also for people who relocate, and there is also co-living product entering. And if you have this kind of brand, and it's still called the Student Hotel, and you've got like a very strong communication and language saying like, may the student in you live forever, and that's something that you really embrace. That's a DNA, right? They are gonna organize bad talks, you know, and they really focus on being the student for the rest of your life, because you learn all the time, and you find people who resonate with this. Then essentially you hit the jackpot, because you're gonna have people who are gonna come and live there. But we've been also working with other clients who have been developing different brands. We still do develop different brands for different target audiences, and that's also a very good approach that provides pretty good ROIs in the end.
Yes, and
I would like to add here, Bart. So basically, this was the exact question we were struggling in when we started short stays. So we were doing predominantly long stays for more than 6 months. That was what our co-living brand was all about. And then later we wanted to expand our horizon because it was kind of saturating and we had a inventory left to optimize. We thought that why not introduce shorter stays for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and how do we want to brand that? So this is the exact question we were struggling with when we wanted to introduce new products in the market. And we eventually thought that Simply Guest was a strong brand as an umbrella brand, and then we created certain sub brands meaning Simply Guest Platinum, Simply Guest. There were few names that we struggled with, but we eventually created sub brands. So that went well for us because we had a primary brand called Simply Guest, and then sub brand actually defined whether it was short stays, long stays, and it worked well for our audience. And they actually um, decide basically they they understood what we were trying to communicate, and that's what was important for us at that point in time. So it worked well in having an umbrella brand and a sub brand in between.
yes, and also I think it really depends whether you are serving the same target audience or not.
Yeah.
For example, We Live, they started doing like We Grow, and then we work. They did We Live, and then We Grow, and then like a lot of bunch of we's. Why? Because it was the same people that use all of these services. I'm wondering now. I mean, the person who asked the question, Williams, I know you and a bit like where your brand is, but you know, if you creating a new brand, or like if you developing a new product for a completely different target audience, it might make more sense to create a new one. A part of your old one has so much influence and so much already recognition that it would make sense to keep it.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to strategy in the end of the day. Yeah, what do you want to do with the brand, and how do you want to grow it? So
long-term vision.
Yeah, long-term vision, definitely.
Which sometimes it's really hard to stick to the plan.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure to host this panel with you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much for
all of
having us, Sandra. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Mayank,
Sandra.
for joining us from India. Thank you.
Thanks, Bart. Thanks,
Guy.
Guy.
Yes.
And we're getting back to the studio, which is here.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Have a nice one, guys.
And now the mic drops.